Hello and welcome to Feeling Therapeutic. This is our very first episode, and I am with Stacey Roles, RN PhD. She is the founder of Roles and Associates. It's right there in the name. And she is also my supervisor. And so this is going to be very educational for everyone involved, including myself. Stacey, welcome, and thank you for coming onto the show.
Well, thanks so much, John.
So, we're here to introduce feeling therapeutic, but in many ways, we're here to introduce the idea of feelings in the context of therapy. So, I was just wondering off the top of your head, is there any big idea that you want to share with the audience?
I think it's important when we're talking about feelings to recognize that we all have feelings. We all experience a range of feelings in any given day, in any given moment,
Mhm.
sometimes multiple feelings at the same time.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, we might think that certain feelings are problematic. We might want to get rid of them. Um, so the first thing I like to talk about when I'm talking about different emotions is that every emotion shows up for a reason and has a need that it wants to have met. And if we can start looking at our feelings as showing up for a reason to keep us happy, safe, secure, etc., and we'll talk more about that. Then we might start listening to our feelings in a different way, much like when we touch something hot and we listen to that sensation and pull our hand away
Mhm.
because it's trying to keep us safe, right? So our feelings come up in the same way. It wants us to be, our emotions want us to generally seek out contentment, being at ease, at peace. Um, so just recognizing when an emotion comes up and being curious with ourselves about why it might be arising in that moment be very helpful.
I think that makes a lot of sense because I think people have an inherent understanding that if they're feeling joy or they're feeling excitement, these are positive feelings that feed into the experiences that they're having. But if you're feeling, let's say, worried about something or something is making you feel down, there is a roundabout way of getting to joy and happiness through that. It's understanding these are things that you care about. These are things that are on your mind, and they're very indicative of like what it is you're chewing on.
Absolutely. And I do like to preface most of my conversations about feelings with that concept of contentment because we don't spend enough time focused on what we're actually pursuing. There's all these, sayings, the pursuit of happiness
Mm.
or chasing joy, but most of us are actually trying to seek out contentment in our day-to-day lives. And we strive to spend most of our time there because being at a high level of joy all the time isn't really attainable, right? So now with social media, and of course it's been talked about a lot, but we're always seeing people at their most joyous moments, right?
Yeah.
I'm on this fantastic vacation, or I'm, having dinner at this fabulous restaurant, or at this great sports game or something. And so we're seeing that constantly because people aren't generally posting the moments when they're content, which is hopefully the majority of our days, right? So, like when I'm scrolling through Netflix or something, I'm not taking photos and putting it on social media. So, we have this comparator, and we tend to think, especially if people are experiencing some forms of intense feelings or disorders like anxiety or depression, that's the comparator. I'm feeling like this and everybody else is feeling like that all the time.
Hmm.
So really focusing on what am I striving for and contentment. And that could be like having a cup of tea or like feeling the sun on your face now that it's spring. You know, um, it's striving for that contentment, that feeling of ease in our lives, as our baseline. And then of course we're going to experience the other ones outside of that as well, right?
I'm really excited for the new social media platform, Bad Times, where you just take pictures of yourself during the downtime. I'm
Yeah.
having a good day. Make sure you get on your socials immediately.
Yeah. That makes me think of there's a Snapchat filter with the crying filter. Have you seen
Yeah,
that one? And when you look at it, like it's hilarious.
I
Yeah.
love that. So that's you bring up a good point. If someone were to come in to a session, their first session with you, and say, "Yeah, I'm happy all the time. There's nothing going on." What would your take be as the professional in the room?
There'd probably be a lot of digging. We do a lot of curiosity around what that means.
Mhm,
If perhaps there was uh, a rule set in place for the person or by somebody else that they needed to maintain happiness all the time, what a happy person means to them, what their maybe rules in their life that show up are around happiness and people who are sad or people who are experiencing other emotions.
mhm.
I would want to do a lot of digging around that. When it comes to emotions, we tend to learn all of the primary emotions as children, right?
Fair.
Kindergarten or whatever. It's like happy, sad, mad. Um, so in the same way that we learn what primary colors are,
Mhm.
right? So we learn like, I don't even know, red. What are they? Red,
Green,
yellow,
blue, yellow?
blue. Yeah, okay. And then blue and yellow make green. And
Yeah.
so, but then as you grow older, you tend to start to learn what the different colors are, right? Like
Mhm,
either, you stand in a wedding and there's like bridesmaids dress colors that are like aubergine or something. Now
mhm,
you know what that is. Or you want to paint your house and they say that's not white, that's eggshell white or whatever. So you tend to learn what all these other colors are. Um, we don't always get that same learning in our life experiences with emotions.
mhm,
So if I'm sad or if I'm angry, can I put the emotion of, disappointed or bewildered, or all these emotions have these different flavors to them.
right.
And a really great way to start to think about emotions is when you notice a change in your mood. You know, those days when you're fine, you're going about your day, you might be on autopilot a little bit. And then all of a sudden you realize you're in a crabby mood, you're just a little
Mhm,
cranky. Um, Checking in with yourself when you notice that shift and be like, "Okay, what was going on in that moment? Did I have a different emotion? Where do I feel that emotion in my body?"
mhm.
Because we really tend to feel our emotions in different spots, and that could be different for different people, or some people can have some of the same experiences. A lot of people know about, butterflies in your stomach when you're anxious. So that's a good example, or like tension in your jaw when you're angry.
Yeah.
So you can start with those, but then be curious about the next time you're disappointed, where you're feeling that in your body, or the next time you feel maybe like your rights have been thwarted, like the boundaries been crossed, and see where you notice that in your body. There's all these different ways that it shows up, and the body is really the best way to tell for us to pinpoint an emotion to it, and just be really curious about how that comes up. It can really help to identify and then help us potentially meet the need that that emotion showing us that it has.
Do you find that, it's a hard sell to, make a client who's maybe not in that mindset already to care about the distinction between, frustration and indignation, these kind of fine-tuning understandings of just being mad?
Yeah, it's very dependent on if the situation that the person's presenting in, right? If the person is, at their highest anger point that they've ever been at, it's not the time to maybe discuss the nuances between the emotions. But if there's something, say somebody's been struggling with anger for a long time, there's likely a reason why that anger keeps coming up. Or maybe it's because they haven't learned to identify that there's a lot of sadness there. And now the sadness is pushing to the surface, but the anger is what's showing itself, for
Mm.
example. Anger is a very motivating emotion.
Mhm,
Most people, if given the choice between feeling sad or angry, would pick anger because sad just wants to kind of curl up in a ball and cry, and anger wants to do something about it.
mhm.
Right. So it's a motivating emotion. And people feel more empowered typically with anger than sadness. Um, so, we get behind what it is, that there's multiple emotions there, where the person's pinpointing it as one. And if it's like, I'm happy all the time, you know, and then you're like, okay, well, that's, these are all the emotions that exist for most humans. I can't say for all, but for most people. Um, are there, and there's variations to the extents that they're felt with
Yeah.
every individual, right? But typically people show or experience rather an assortment of them. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the emotions and what they mean. Sometimes people have an aversion to anger, maybe because they grew up in a very angry household. So they've
Okay.
decided, I never want to present that myself that way, even when the emotion comes up. So maybe the anger still exists within that person, but they don't show it. So let's talk about, and then we can dig a little deeper and see what's going on.
Not uh, a great many of our clients seem to also have psychoactive medications that they're on, and I was wondering if you have found that those play a large role in their experience and also ability to share what they're feeling.
Yeah. So medication and therapy can live in the same camp or it can be in two separate camps.
Hmm.
So it's important to note that for some presentations or disorders, if we're using diagnostic terms, um, the evidence shows us that medication is the first line of treatment,
Hmm.
meaning that's the first thing that you try. You can add therapy on if you want, but they need to be on medication. Then there's other presentations, or if people are diagnosed where the evidence tells us that therapy is the first thing to try, and then you can add on medication if you want.
Right.
So oftentimes, a marriage in those areas can be quite important. Can it cancel out some emotions? Sometimes it can. And sometimes that's the reason that
Hmm.
people might be prescribed certain medications by their prescribers, so psychiatrists or family physicians or nurse practitioners. So there's reasons for the different medications and reasons why we might want to decrease the emotion with therapy or manage it better, or that somebody might want to prescribe that to help manage it better for the person. I can give you an example. Somebody with a severe anxiety disorder,
Hmm.
their prescriber might put them on an anxiolytic, right, to help manage the anxiety. But then you also do the therapy interventions that can help mitigate that. So both together can oftentimes get a good result depending on the person and what they're presenting with.
Okay. So if someone's watching this series and comes across emotion that really speaks to them, and maybe they're thinking about that emotion for the first time, what can they do to follow up on that idea and say, all right, maybe I am feeling shame or I'm feeling disgust, something like that.
I think it's familiarizing ourselves with the different emotions. It might make it easier to pin what one you're feeling when you're
Mm.
feeling it in your body. And one way we often will suggest that people try doing that, if you Google emotion wheels, and maybe you can bring one of these up for the podcast or a link. There are these wheels that will have like the primary emotions in the middle, and then they'll have maybe what else they could be with more. A more detailed word and then external words. They're often used by writers to use different language for different emotions
Mhm.
when they're publishing. But it's a really great way to familiarize yourself with some of these other emotions that you may not have learned throughout your, growing up or becoming an adult or whatever it may be.
It's really expanding your own vocabulary so you can
Mm.
have an idea of how to kind of think about these difficult emotions that kind of can surprise you and pop up randomly, and then you're like, "What is this? What am I feeling?"
Yeah. And, once we can, the first step is always noticing.
Yeah.
Let's be curious about ourselves, what's coming up, what's happening, what we're experiencing. And once we can notice that, and then maybe identify what it is, then we can start to ask ourselves, what's this emotion trying to tell me?
Mhm.
Right. So um, some emotion all emotions have a need, as we talked about earlier. For example, anger might be telling us that my boundaries have been violated. So if I never had experienced anger, people would walk all over me all the time potentially, right? They
Yeah.
just walk in your house, take all your stuff. You're not going to get angry because you don't have that emotion. So
Yeah.
we need these emotions. And anger saying, whoa, whoa, this isn't okay. I want to stand up for myself. So what we do to meet the need of anger is meet the need of that, you know, no, you can't take my things. No, you can't talk to me that way. No, you can't, and we reset our boundaries.
Mhm.
So, and once we do that, the emotion tends to decrease because it doesn't need to be as loud as it has been. If we don't do it, typically gets louder and
Yeah.
louder and louder, right? So, we can use the same example with one of those, more sought after emotions like joy. If you've ever had good news that you wanted to share with one particular person and you can't reach them, what happens to that joy? It gets stifled, right?
Yeah.
So joy's need is to thrive.
Yeah.
So every emotion has that piece. So a lot of work in therapy can be done around emotions and that recognition and not stifling these emotions, but doing healthy things
Mhm.
to meet the needs because sometimes we try and stifle our emotions in unhealthy ways as well, right? So the purpose is to be able to pick healthier, more productive ways for ourselves to increase our contentment, not decrease it.
Well, on that positive note, I'm just going to say that I hope people can get the most out of this show, can pick their favorite episodes, or maybe watch the whole library and become emotional experts so that if they do decide to address whatever they're feeling, they know where to start and they know how to go from there.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us this intro, and I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
Stacey.
care.